Alright gang, let's work on lesson 3.3, Prove Lines Parallel. We're going to be working on the practice problems, bottom of page 1 and page 2 of your notes. I want to remind you about what our goal is for this lesson. Remember that we want to determine if the lines are parallel by looking at the diagram. Sometimes the picture is not necessarily drawn accurately, and so we have to decide if the information given is enough to decide if the lines are parallel using the properties that we discovered in 3.2. So what I would like you to do is pause your video right now and we will go down to the bottom of the page. And once I get there, we will join back up again. Hold on. Alright, now that we're at the bottom of the page, we are going to be doing these practice problems. We are going to be talking about the special angle names that we have for all of the angles that are in our picture. If we read these directions here, it does say that we should number each angle and identify the special angle pairs that we have. So our goal is going to be to identify. You don't have these angle numbers in here already, so can you start in the upper left-hand corner and put a 1 right there, and then we're going to work our way down the transversal and fill in these angles. So go down below that, put a 2, and then a 3, and then a 4, running down the left side of the transversal. And then we're going to run back up the other side of the transversal. That's, remember, the line that cuts the other two lines. And we're going to number angle 5, angle 6, angle 7, and angle 8. And so we're going to talk about all of the different kinds of angles that we have here. And so we're going to start out here with the first one. It does ask us for the corresponding angles. Remember, the corresponding angles are the angles that make the F. And the corresponding angles have to be in the same corner. So if we start with angle 1 right there, the angle that matches that angle in the same corner down below would be angle 3. Or we could take angle 8, and that would match down below with angle 6. Or we could take angle 7 and match that with angle 5. Or we could do the last angle, angle 2, and match that with angle 4. So what I'd like you to do is take a second, fill all of those in, and we'll compare to what we have. Now that you have those all filled in, you should have something that looks kind of like this. I have angle 1 and 3, 2 and 4, 5 and 7, 6 and 8. Make sure that yours looks like that. I'm going to go through here and erase all of those highlights, and let's move on to the next one. The consecutive interior angles. Those are the angles, remember, that are between the lines, and they have to be on the same side. They make the C. So that would be angle 2, and then between the lines on the same side would be angle 3. Angle 2 and 3 go together. Or we could look at 7 and 6. Those would be the two that go together. So fill those in. Your answer should look something like that guy right there. 2 and 3 with 7 and 6. All right, let's erase those and let's do consecutive exterior angles. The exterior angles, remember, have to be outside the lines, but they are still consecutive. They are still on the same side. So angle 1 would match on the same side with angle 4, or we could take angle 5 and match that on the same side with angle 8. So record those in your answer blank. Should look something like that guy right there. Angle 1 and 4, angle 8 and 5. Let's erase those, and we're going to jump ahead to the alternate interior angles. So remember, alternate interior are the ones between the lines, but they have to be on different sides of the transversal. So if I start with angle 2, between the lines would be 3, 7, and 6. On the other side of the transversal would be angle 6. And then angle 7 would pair with angle 3. Those are the ones that make the Z. So record those, your alternate interior angles. Should look something like that. 2 with 6, 3 with 7. Let's erase those guys right there, and let's look for the alternate exterior angles. Exterior, again, is outside of the lines. That's 1 and 8 with 4 and 5. If we're alternate, angle 1 on the left would pair with angle 5 on the right. or angle 4 on the left would pair with angle 8 on the right. So record those answers there, alternate exteriors. And then the linear pairs. Now these ones get a little bit tricky, and there are many combinations for linear pairs. So let's think this through a little bit as best we can. Linear pairs are two angles next to each other that make a straight line. That could be 1 and 8, or it could be 2 and 7, or it could be 3 and 6, or it could be 4 and 5. So the linear pairs, there are many combinations, but you also notice that we could go the other way. We could put 1 with 2, 8 with 7, 3 with 4, or 6 with 5. So when we do our our linear pairs, we notice that there are 8 different pairs of angles that we could have. So take a second, record all of those, and then I will show you, make sure we'll double check we are all on the same page. So there you go, there's our linear pairs. Oops. Let me go down here just a little bit and get the rest of them there. Notice I did my up and down angles and did my side to side angles in 2 different groups there, if that's helpful for you. Let's go back to our diagram and erase what we have here. And we'll do our last ones, our vertical angles. Remember, the vertical angles are the ones that point at each other. So vertical angles would be the 1 with the 7, or the 3 with the 5, or we could go the other way, the 8 with the 2, and the 6 with the 4. So vertical angles, there's 4 different pairs. Take a second, record those, and then I'll show you what I got. Make sure you got them all. There we go. Looks something like that. Those are all the special angle pairs. Now let's jump to page 2 and see if we can do some of the practice problems. So I'm going to have you pause right there, and I'm going to move on to page 2. All right, guys, we are on page 2. We are going to be deciding if the lines are parallel. So let's read through this first paragraph here, the statement. It says, Molly Mathematician was doing her geometry homework, trying to draw parallel lines and special angle pairs. She was not being very careful with her drawings or labeling angles. Help her decide if the lines are parallel from the given information given, not from the drawing. So it's really important here that we go by the numbers in the picture, not the pictures themselves. So pay attention over here on the right. It says that the lines are not drawn accurately on purpose. Go by the numbers, not the drawings. So it's really important that we follow the numbers to help us make our decisions. Looking at question number 1, we look at the angles. We do notice that they're equal. If we trace the angles and we connect them, we notice that we make that Z. So now we're thinking alternate interior angles, and then we have to think, are alternate interior angles supposed to be congruent? And in this case, they are supposed to be congruent. That means that those lines must be parallel. So I'm going to take my little parallel mark right there. Those lines are parallel because alternate interior angles are equal. Look at question number 2. We trace those angles that are in that picture. And those angles, I notice, are both outside of the lines. They're both on the outside, and they are alternate exteriors. And we need to think, are alternate exteriors supposed to be equal to each other? And in fact, they are. That is what we have. So we know that these lines are parallel because the alternate exterior angles are equal to each other. So again, we have another set of parallel lines. Let's jump down to numbers 3 and 4. Number 3, I trace the 2 angles that are given to me. And I noticed that those are consecutive interior angles. And consecutive interior angles are not supposed to be equal, but they should add up to 180 degrees. So I have to ask myself, does 100 plus 75 equal 180? And they do not. So we say that these lines are not parallel because the consecutive interior angles do not equal 180 degrees. So then we say to ourselves, they are not parallel because consecutive interior angles equal 180 degrees, and those are not. So we say that these guys are not parallel. Then we look at question number 4. For question number 4, again, we trace the angles that are given to us. And the one thing I notice is that there is nothing on this second angle right here, on the second vertex. So that means that these lines can't be parallel. In fact, those two angles are linear pairs, and we know that linear pairs do not make parallel lines at all. So because those are linear pair angles, we know that those guys are not parallel. So we fill in that statement. These lines are not parallel because linear pairs do not make parallel lines. All right, let's jump ahead to numbers 5 and 6. Question number 5, again, we trace our angles right here. And we trace the two angles. And again, we notice there is nothing on that bottom angle. So I'm thinking that these lines can't be parallel. In fact, I look more closely and I realize that we have vertical angles. And I know that vertical angles do not make lines parallel. So we say that they are not parallel because vertical angles do not make lines parallel. Then we look at question 6, always tracing those angles right there. And I notice that both of those angles are in the middle. They are both interior angles. And I know that those guys, because they're both on the same side of the transversal, have to add up to 180 degrees. I do need to check that out. Take 152 plus 28. 8 plus 2 is 0. Carry 5, 6, 7, 8. And in fact, they do add to 180 degrees. So I know that these lines are parallel because consecutive interior angles equal 180 degrees. So even though the numbers look a little bit weird, pay attention to the relationship. And in this case, they are parallel. The last couple questions that we have here, number 7 and 8, we look at the angles that are given. And when we trace them, that is the one that makes the F. And those are the corresponding angles. And I do know or remember that corresponding angles should be equal to each other. And because those two angles are not equal, we say that the lines are not parallel because corresponding angles are congruent, and those angles are not congruent. The last one that we check, number 8, this one is a little bit tricky. We trace the two angles that are given, and we notice that they actually are not anything special. They don't have a special angle pair. The interior is between the lines. They're not both interior. They're not both exterior. They're not corresponding. There's nothing special about those. So in order to make some decisions here, we need to fill in a little bit more information. And the one thing that I like to do is always find the equal angles. And so I do know that this 27 could be put right here, 27, because those are vertical angles to each other. And then when I trace the angles that are given, the 153 and the 27, now I have consecutive interior angles, and those are supposed to equal 180 degrees. So 153 plus 27 does indeed equal 180 degrees. Those lines are parallel, and the reason is a little bit tricky. the vertical angles are equal, and the consecutive interior angles equal 180. That is one way that we can, we just used a couple different reasons there, but just because it's not something that we have studied, we can use a couple different reasons or logics to come up with a conclusion. So, pause your video, jump into your homework. If you have questions, we can talk tomorrow in class.